So the third region is AYAH, and as always, if you haven't checked the other videos, there are 4 other region guides in the pinned comments, so make sure to check out those if you're struggling with any other region apart from AYAH. As for AYAH, the element in this region will be the fire one, meaning that you should be bringing a summoner with a fire weapon as well as mostly fire units when possible. If not, you can consider using a wind or a light and dark. Just make sure to not bring water units because the bosses here are of wind element. So for this region, the first mini boss will be the Brilliant Glory TRIAN. This one is definitely not too difficult, and pretty much the only thing you need to counter this one is a heal block. This will actually be the same requirement for one of the other bosses in this region. So what this unit does, it actually heals up with the 3rd skill based on the damage dealt, and with the 4th skill it's actually able to apply continuous recovery to itself, meaning that it has 2 ways to heal up, and if you do not bring a heal block or counter it with a huge party, you will have a lot of trouble dealing with it. So for the heal block options, I would say the best one, if you are willing to build it, as it will help within this region a lot, would be the Fire Harpo. So that is Colleen. She is a nat 4 unit, and she does have a useful wind counterpart, so it sort of depends which one you want to build to not waste skill ups too much. I built Colleen just for this region, and honestly she does a lot. She is able to heal block, she is able to attack break, she is able to heal up a bit. Her heal is not too huge, but it's usually enough to sustain you. And her 3rd skill also has an attack buff, meaning that you can increase your damage that way without using Bastet. So yeah, as you can see in here, the great thing about this mini boss, that the units you use are very flexible. I personally use this, so the Fire Element Summoner, of course. As I mentioned, Colleen, her 2nd skill actually is able to upkeep the heal block permanently, even when in a non-souling slot, because it has an 18-second cooldown, and the buff, or rather the debuff, lasts for 20 seconds, meaning that you can heal block permanently. Also, if you play Cleave, as you know, his 2nd charged ability also has a heal block, so you can sort of use it as an extra option. However, if your Cleave is not built on accuracy, which I sort of don't expect him to be, you may have trouble landing it, so do make sure to bring another unit with heal block. Colleen is the best option in my opinion. Any other heal block will work as long as it is not water element to not get resisted easily. So that means like the Wind Witch is a decent option, Celia is a decent option. For the 2nd and 3rd unit, you are super flexible, so if you're playing something like Kina, you may not need another heal like Shushu because the boss actually doesn't do that much damage. You can go for a more offensive option like a damage dealer or another buffer, for example, a defense breaker, whatever, to maximize damage. And for the 3rd one, I actually went with a damage dealer. You can also go for more safety if you are struggling, or just go with a damage dealer. I personally, to speed this run up, usually use a Thessalian or the Rosario, the Fire Vampire Hunter. But to showcase that it works, for this one I used Bulldozer. He's a nat 3 and you may eventually want to build him if you haven't already. Fire Fairy is another good option, and she will actually work a lot better than Bulldozer for one of the mini bosses coming up. So yeah, whatever damage dealer you bring will work just fine. Just make sure to bring a fire one so you can get more extra damage from the region buff. Now, the 2nd mini boss in this region is the Lightwing Griffon, and this one is actually extremely difficult in my opinion. I would say this is probably the 2nd most difficult boss, if not the most difficult across all regions. And the reason for that is simply he does a lot of damage. And by a lot, I mean a lot. He is pretty much able to one-shot my fully tanked Cleave, which is a bit scary, especially if you're playing Cleave as well. If not, you may be able to sustain him with another frontline unit. But yeah, what this guy does is he's able to self-attack buff on himself. He is able to heal, so you do need that heal block still. Oh, actually no, it scales with the target's max HP, so apologies there. Basically, the more HP you will have, the more damage he will deal. One way to counter this is to actually build your frontline unit on a more defense-focused build. This means that instead of stacking like 80,000 HP and a low defense, you should do a bit less HP but more defense. That way, percentage-wise, you will take less damage. And on top of that, if you use a healer that scales with max HP, he will be able to heal you up a bit easier. So for reference, let's say my cleave had 40,000 HP on a defense build or 80,000 on an HP build. If I had a Shushu that healed, for example, 30,000, with a max HP build, she would only heal like what, 30-40%. With a defense build, she would pretty much heal me up to full. So that's why defense builds will be more useful to fighting this boss. But yeah, if you're not using cleave, make sure to build your Soul Link tank on a more defense based build. And yeah, other ways to counter the boss will of course be bringing a heal block so he doesn't leech too much HP from his attacks. And if you want to lower his damage by a little bit and you have the option to do so, make sure to bring a stripper to remove that attack buff. However, since the most of the damage comes from that max HP skill, it is definitely not needed. And yeah, the team that I use for this boss is pretty much this. So I go without heal buff here. However, later I tested the Colleen and she actually worked pretty well as well. I do not recommend using her as a soul healer because you will not be able to sustain the damage in most cases. But yeah, for my team, I use Shushu as a Soul Link Logs to maximize on those heals. Also, I used Bastet to lower the attack of the boss a bit, as well as bring a shield as sort of an extra health bar. For the third option, I used a damage dealer, but especially with this boss, if you are struggling, you can go for another sustain unit and either go for something like a defense buff, something like another heal, another shield buff, or whatever reduces damage, either by debuffing the boss or buffing yourself. And you should be able to pass it without too much trouble as long as the frontline unit is able to survive. But yeah, as you can see, sometimes the boss does deal quite a lot of damage with his skills, and it can be scary, especially if you're playing cleave and you do not have too good of a gear yet. But hopefully you do get some perspective on how to counter this and beat it on your end. And the third mini-boss in this region is the crying fiend Warbear. This one is probably the easiest, or maybe the brilliant glory one is easier. Really, they don't do that much damage, neither this one nor this one. And what this guy does is he also heals quite a bit and he can buff up a defense buff. So the damage you will deal will be significantly lowered, but the general strategy behind it, as long as you bring a heal block, you will be able to kill it eventually. However, the good thing about this one is usually Colleen will be enough heals with her third skill. If not, you can bring another buffer like a Bastet, for example, for shield. You can bring another healer. I think I brought another healer. I don't even remember. We'll see in the clip. And a great unit that actually works here really well is the Fire Fairy, because the boss is able to defense buff himself with the second skill. Fire Fairy's third skill is actually able to, first of all, strip the defense buff, replace it with a defense break, as well as add some additional burn effects to deal with the boss even easier. So yeah, as you can see here, this is pretty much the team that I've used. Of course, Fire, Cleave. However, even that is really not that required. You can go for something like a Wind one if you are struggling with shields. Or, for example, if you're using a Bulldozer, you can go with a Wind Cleave to get that defense buff from the third skill and boost his damage. I tried using Bulldozer, he works just fine, but he does less damage than the Fire Fairy. The other two units, as you can see, Colleen for the tiny heal block as well as attack buff. I did bring Shushu, but I only brought her because I didn't wanna change the team too much. And since you use her a lot in other regions, I feel like it's better to use the least amount of units when building them specifically for this area. That way you save up on resources for quite a bit. Both of those healers are able to keep me full even in a non-soul slot. That way I can bring the Fire Fairy in the Soul one and actually just spam her third skill a lot. As you can see, whenever the boss buffs up defense, unfortunately we're not gonna see it right here, but as you can see right now, he has a defense buff, and as soon as I get 4 mana, the Fire Fairy will use her third skill. She will remove the defense buff, she will replace it with a defense break and get some extra burn effects. The boss will keep cycling that defense buff, but your Fairy is able to quickly remove it with that third skill, especially if she is in a soul slot. And yeah, really not having any trouble with this boss at all. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the AYAH mini bosses. This is part 3 of 5, so if you're looking to counter other regions, make sure to check the pinned comment for links to all 5 other videos. And I will move on to the Florence one.